Ain't it weird how as soon as any form of holiday seems to come around, hundreds of games that you've never even heard of seem to pop up overnight, with thousands upon thousands of random collector's editions appearing also, with some of these being at absolutely insane prices that even Elon Musk probably won't be able to afford. And I'm sure there's one question in everybody's head. What exactly is the point of them? Like, genuinely, you pay an extra $20 at minimum for an already expensive experience, and the only extras you get in most cases are a couple of lousy postcards that you pick up out of the box once, glance over for about 10 seconds and then think, oh, this is garbage, and regret your purchase for the next couple of weeks. But you'll never guess what. In some cases, you might even manage to bag yourself an art book, and if you're really lucky, even a CD composing of the game's soundtrack, which most definitely justifies the loan you had to take out to afford it. But despite all this, they're still sold by some miracle, we still buy tons of them, and surely there's got to be a reason behind it. Otherwise, they would have suffered the same fate as the toy-to-life industry, surely. Which is why today, I'm taking a deep dive into the unexplored depths of the topics, showing some of my personal favourites, which arguably belong in an art museum, as well as some of my least favourites, which are some of the most awful things ever made. Where did they come from? Why are they so expensive? And why is there such a cult-like following behind them? I'll try to answer all of these questions and much more in the next few minutes of your life. I'm your host, the Info Arcade, and this is Beyond the Box, a deep dive into collector's edition games. Make sure to like and subscribe before we get into it. Despite seeming like quite a simple thing to define, the definition of what a collector's edition game actually is a heavily contested topic, with no solid answer to it that everybody agrees upon. However, for the sake of the video, I'll be classing it as a version of a video game other than the standard edition, in which you get bonus physical objects other than the game disc itself and a manual, meaning that games which purely included DLC and limited editions won't be included. Looking at you, Rocket League. Even when we narrow the definition down this much, however, there's still an extremely wide different range of collector's edition games, but for the most part, there are two main categories in which they fall under. Steelbook versions, featuring unique artwork on the cases, and rarely any additional content otherwise, and those which feature other bonuses other than these, which I'm pretty sure don't have an actual term other than the bog standard one for collector's editions. Even when following these definitions though, it's still a challenge sometimes to see whether a game is classed as a collector's edition or not, and this challenge was heavily strengthened when trying to figure out when the collector's edition originated, and what was first ever made. However, there were a few that kept popping up when I was trying to research the topic, all coming from the mid-1990s, as well as being for PC, which is a weird thought when you realise that now 90% of these novelty markups of games end up being released exclusively for consoles. According to collectorsedition.org, the first collector's edition game ever was Myst, Desktop Edition, released in 1993, which features a screensaver CD as well as a mouse map themed towards the game, which looks sick if you ask me. I find it even funnier too that the so-called first collector's edition game was for a game that only takes like half an hour if you actually know how to solve the puzzles. They were really trying to get you to purchase it there. The other main competitor for the title of first collector's edition though was Batman Forever, the limited edition release for the SNES, which released in 1995. Unlike the previous game, this collector's edition was actually exclusive, only being available in the UK, specifically in Woolworths stores, and it features so much cool stuff to it, like a huge brick of a book about the making of the game, and a few neat little gimmick notepads such as Batman Data and Batman Diary. But there's a pattern that you might have noticed. They don't use the term collector's edition, do they? The term wasn't exactly a thing at the time, so it was just common for companies to chuck together whatever two words had the nicest ring to them, usually being some form of the word special though. The first instances of these games which actually coined the term didn't show up for another few years after this, until the dawn of the new millennium, when Final Fantasy Anthology released just a year earlier, featuring a soundtrack CD of the game's greatest hits. I told you it'd be a common theme among them. You'd imagine that as soon as these games started to appear, they'd all appear at once, right? Companies would have found a way to double their profits, because there was clearly a demand, and pump out as many as you could, right? But surprisingly, it was the opposite that had happened, and these games were few and far between, with only a few being released for each year per platform. I'm not quite sure what the reason for this was, or if there even was one. But this all began to change starting from the 7th generation of consoles. In the first year of the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3's launches, overnight the amount of collector's editions in existence seemed to have doubled, maybe even tripled, with there seemingly being one released every day. And there isn't even a reason for this happening really, well a good one I mean. There are only a few explanations that come to mind as why I think this happened, the first being that the games were bigger, better, more deep and whatnot, so there were really just more things to add little bonuses about. And the other answer is pretty self-explanatory really. The company's probably just pulled a Mr. Krabs and wanted some quick money. And by some, I mean lots of. When you take a look at the prices, quite a good article I found on Hardcore Gamer, which shows how fast the prices add up, with them very easily going over $100, and if you wanted all the collector's editions that are released every year, it'd be running you for about 10 grand. The 8th generation didn't really face that much change in the collector's edition market, with demand and supply both staying relatively the same, with there still not being a major increase in demand, prices slightly increasing, but that was bound to happen anyway. They are collector's items after all, and the scene stayed perfectly calm for the first few years of the consoles were out, from 2013 to 2016. However, in 2017, things definitely changed for the worse, and the state of collector's editions crumbled practically overnight. The companies quickly began to realise something. There was nothing stopping them from releasing a bunch of different editions for their games. Some companies even started to take the piss really, making many versions of the game as I could think of. Like, let's take a look at Assassin's Creed Origins, which released in 2017. It had 6 different editions to it. Not 3 or 4, 6. What the actual hell Ubisoft was thinking is beyond me. These 6 editions were Standard Edition, Deluxe Edition, Gold Edition, God's Edition, Dawn of the Creed Edition, Dawn of the Creed Legendary Edition. Not a single one having Collector's Edition in the title. But it gets even worse than this. Some games' largest Collector's Editions didn't contain things that the lower down editions did, meaning that if you really want to have the goodies, you need to buy more than one version of the game and have a bunch of duplicates left over as well. So what's really the point, being honest? Surely this is where they have to end though. How could it get any worse? It can't, right? But it does, and it will, by a mile. Let's take a look at Collector's Edition for Temtem as an example. The edition originally retailed for about $100 and seems pretty standard for a Collector's Edition of the game, including a 6-inch statue of all 3 starter Tems, which looks pretty sick to be honest, as well as 3 iron-on patches, a pin set, and some trading cards. All in all, a pretty nice edition, but there's an issue. Notice what I didn't mention? That's right, it doesn't even come with the game itself. How am I meant to play it when it's not there? Make it make sense, guys. And this strategy was shown to be a complete flop however, as I found the collector's edition now goes on Amazon for a pretty standard 35 quid, much more reasonable if you ask me. That seems enough for ranting about them though, and it sums up the history pretty well, and the current state of them for the most part, but I'll come back to it later when ranting about who actually buys them. For now at least, let's move on to a different topic. Since COVID hit, there was a few more game companies that popped up with virtually identical names, such as limited run games, strictly limited games, special reserve games, and you get the idea. All of these having one thing in common, selling an extremely limited amount of game special editions, always less than 10k, but usually more around 2000. The prices on these were also questionable at best. Some are pretty understandable, like that of Fox and Forest on Strictly Limited, currently at £44 and 8p, which is pretty cheap for a game alone nowadays to be fair, with many retailing for 40, 50, and maybe in some cases even £60. This collector's edition also gives you a soundtrack CD, an art book, poster, sticker sheet, and another poster set. Being honest, it has everything you could want in a collector's edition, and actually for a decent price, but as soon as we head over to a limited run, it gets a lot worse. This is who many game companies go through if they want a physical release, but the prices on some cases are absolutely insane. The entry level price on these is absurd, with the bare minimum being $69.99, and not even getting that much with it. Like look at Beacon Pines which goes for this price, or you get the CD, a couple of pins and some colouring sheets. How that price is justified is absolutely beyond me. But it gets worse. It gets a lot worse. And I know it sounds stupid, but this one is kinda heartbreaking, and mainly because it's a Ron Gilbert game. The Monkey Island fan bundle is definitely something, and something not in a good way. It genuinely surprised me if anyone bought it, as you got 4 collector's editions of the newest entry, which why anybody would need is also a mystery, and the price itself is even worse, coming in at a low $420. And to think that even Guybrush himself said to never pay more than $20 for a video game. Hardly getting your money's worth if you ask me. This $20 rule though is practically impossible to stick to in the modern day. Even if you upped it to like 70, it'd still be almost impossible to stick to. The inflation on video games is genuinely completely insane. I went on a scroll through eBay's recently sold listings for collector's edition games, and the vast majority were upwards of £80, with the only ones still going fairly cheap being mass-produced ones for the Xbox 360 and the PS3. This basically ends up being true for standard edition games too. Everyone's seen the price inflation for games, with retro consoles and cartridges going absolutely insane. Look at the original Super Mario Bros, which made in 1985, which sold just 2 years ago for the low price of $2 million, with the only reason being that the copy was sealed, which hardly justifies the absurd price. Even more recent games can have this absurd price tag alongside it. Let's have a glance at Yokai Watch 3, which released in 2016. The game originally retailed at around $50 at launch, but just 8 years later it goes for a whopping $380 loose according to pricecharting.com. I would just bring it down to a limited release, as it was definitely hard to come by all this time ago, but even other games for the DS and 3DS have these prices, with Pokemon being a key example of this. I love these games, I would kill for a complete collection of them all, but in some cases, such as Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it just doesn't seem possible, and technically because this is actually relevant to the video too, there are also collector's editions for these two games. Standard versions alone sell for upwards of £90 now, but if you wanted to look at the version which not only included the Poke Walker, a possession much strived over, but also a figurine of the respective box legendary, this shoots up to a minimum of £500. But why do people pay these absolutely ridiculous prices, and how do these prices even get this bad? In short, resellers, one of the most hated groups of people in the collecting community. If it wasn't for them, the prices would probably be much lower, and being honest, that's a topic for a completely different video. But regardless of this, people still pay these prices, right? They're not just there to make it look snazzy, there's obviously demand for them. But why do people collect games? You either get the Monkey Island fan bundle 4 times over, or a car. The choice is yours. It isn't even that deep though, being honest. People always try to make out there's a reason for it, whether it's for financial gain, or in some extremes, where old people bring it down to wokeness, or whatever it is nowadays. But it's not that deep, like at all. It's just a hobby. That's literally it. There's practically no difference between collecting video games and collecting something like CDs and records. You just collect something that you use for entertainment. That's all there really is. And sure, there are people who dedicate their whole lives to the hobby, but it's just like any other hobby. Even Pikachu, a singular Pokemon, out of the over 1,000 there are now, with hundreds of die-hard fans, with the largest collection consisting of almost 1,300 pieces of memorabilia. Just a few. But even after using the hobby excuse, it still doesn't explain the casual collector. Why would a random person, not Scott the Waz, he falls under the first paragraph, choose to pay more for the same game? There's a few vague things here that I feel may have an impact on it, but nostalgia seems to be the elephant in the room. If a game company re-released one of your favourite games from when you were a kid, and they included a bunch of little Happy Meal toys, you're probably going to buy that version instead, to try and get that kick out of it. Completing a series is also a big one too. If you have the collector's edition of the first 2 games, why wouldn't you get the third? It seems like a no-brainer surely, especially when you had a limited release number by the end. Even if it was like 5 million, people will still be inclined to get it before it's gone, which was seen by the not so limited release of Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Or, and I genuinely didn't think about this until writing the entire paragraph, you probably just get a collector's edition game if you were just a die-hard fan of the series, and want to get your hand on as much merchandise as you possibly can. If it isn't going for stupid prices, of course, which makes a lot of sense. How that didn't cross my mind is a genuine mystery. But oh well, it still doesn't excuse the ridiculous prices that can occur. If I'm being honest though, we all know what the actual reason I made this video was, and also the part that's going to take up the next few minutes, my list of the top 5 collector's edition games ever released. Coming in at number 5 was a collector's edition which I got at an absolutely phenomenal price, Baobab's Mausoleum, Grindhouse edition, which I got for a low $19.99. If I'm being honest, this game is weird. It felt like I was drunk while playing it, but my god, it is a blast. I 100% recommend playing it, but I'm not here to talk about the game itself. Being honest, there's a fair bit of filler content in this edition of the game, like the postcard and the sticker sheet, but the attention to detail on the rest is breathtaking. As someone who collects pins, the head of the main character, with ratio, was a must-have. But there's also a poster which lists all the inhabitants on one side, and a map of the area on the other, which was a nice little touch. However, this isn't what I wanted to talk about mainly. You also get a supposed tourist guide, and my god, the attention to detail on this little piece is absolutely phenomenal. It starts off as a normal guide, but the more you get in, the more disturbing it gets. Sticky notes printed on pages, secrets you can't find in game, scribbled writing. I must have read it about 10 times over now, and still haven't got bored from it, which is why it 100% deserves to be on this list. Deciding what goes at the number 4 spot was a tough choice for me, as there's 2 that I feel are pretty similar in quality, but I feel like this one was just very slightly worse, and it's a series that's already been mentioned in this video once. Not all of the games in the Monkey Island series have stupid collector's editions to go alongside them, which you've seen from Tales to Monkey Island, which retailed for about £50, which isn't too bad for what you get in it. These being a fabric map of the Gulf of Melange, which was quite nice, but doesn't fill the whole sheet from what I've seen, it seems a bit annoying. A badge of the Trial of the Century, which we can't really complain about. 22 voodoo cards, which make for quite a nice looking art piece, but pretty basic otherwise, and a pirate piece of 8, with a phenomenal amount of detail shoved onto this tiny little piece of metal. And last, but certainly not least, and the Club 41 coaster, which is just pretty nice looking overall. The only reason I ranked this above the latter entry was just due to it not having a single bad inclusion at all. Number 3 is an interesting case, to be honest. It's one of my favourite games ever, and also one of the few collector's editions released for the Xbox 360 and PS3 that's still expensive to this day. There's only one name that jumps about this, surely. That being the lovable blue hedgehog. Look back on the franchise to date, Sonic Generations. The only issue I had with this was the price point. Otherwise, it is absolutely phenomenal, with an even sicker art style too. Included in the huge box, you could find a statue of both classic and modern Sonic posing together, which my god looks absolutely amazing. A collectible gold ring, which is a gold ring. It's Sonic OMG. One of the best constructed art books I've ever seen, and a 20th anniversary soundtrack collection of the Sonic series in its entirety. It's a shame they didn't do anything to this level for the 30th anniversary though. That isn't even everything there is in the box though. You can find a bonus disc which features a documentary about the history of Sonic. A must watch if you're asking me. I also think the nostalgia factor is definitely playing an effect in this for me though. There's just something about the bright colours and simple 3D designs that just scream out to me, and it's definitely one of the reasons why I think it's as good as it is. The bright colours also probably play a part in the number 2 spot, which is a game that I've ordered but hasn't came yet, partly because a limited run won't ship my order until a pre-ordered game I've bought releases. What else would it be though, other than Clockwork Aquario for the Nintendo Switch? That's a bit of a dumb question really. Majority of people who are watching this have never even heard of a limited run, never mind some niche game which went unfinished for 20, almost 30 years, before eventually being released for the Switch. I'm talking about the regular collector's edition though, as the Ultra collector's edition is a ridiculously high price, with not much difference to it except for another statue. Even the standard collector's edition though, you get a ton of content. How they make profit is a question I don't know the answer to. Starting off the edition, you get not one, but 2 CDs containing music from the game. The first just a standard soundtrack, but the second is some remixes of some of the best tracks from it. As well as this, there's a couple of small things like a collectible coin, a couple of character cards, a couple of sticker sheets, an arcade poster, and a huge reversible poster, which all look phenomenal regardless. But there are 2 things that stand out, the first being one of the most amazing art books I've ever seen. And I know I've said that for generations, but this one's just better in every way. And it's hardcover, which is also a nice bonus. There's so much nice art in here that it's just hard to resist. And finally, something I haven't seen before in a collector's edition, or at least not to this size. There's an acrylic diorama of the main cast of the game, behind one of the nicest looking backdrops that I've ever seen. When my version comes, this is going straight up in my room. But now we're at the last part of the video, the climax of it all, the supposed greatest collector's edition ever made. But what game's taking that spot? Only the most phenomenal, beautiful Metroidvania ever, which I still haven't beaten fully because it's so hard. As a funny little dude with his funny little cape, Hollow Knight. This is by far the most biased opinion I've ever had on this channel, but I will 1000 million billion trillion% die on this hill. In terms of price, you won't even get that much for your money, but I still love the game. The main attraction is a brooch with a knight in the centre, which looks absolutely gorgeous, and then you get 4 gold foil art cards featuring the Knight, Hornet, Quirrell, and the one and only Hollow Knight. If you play on the best console, the Nintendo Switch, you also get a neat looking cleaning cloth, so more free stuff. The map of the entirety of Hollow Nest is also absolutely gorgeous, with so much attention to detail in it. I just love to stare at it sometimes, and that goes for the majority of things in this exclusive edition. The art is beautiful, in-game and out, and it truly deserves the number 1 spot, however biased it may be. But yeah, collector's editions, that about sums them up to the best of my ability. There are probably a few I missed, and I might come back to them another time, but for now, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe if you did.